Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Siobhan Mercer from the Digital Inclusion team at SCVO, and I'm here with my colleague, Jason Railton. Give us a wave, Jason. Thank you. So thank you all for joining us for our first Connect 23 online event. We started our Connect 23 events because we were hearing from more and more organisations who were feeling like they were working in silo and who felt a bit unsure about who else was still working on digital inclusion in Scotland post-lockdown. And we were hearing that some people were feeling quite alone and isolated in their work. So Connect 23 is a series of events that we're hosting this year to explore Scotland's digital landscape and think about ways we can all work together again, looking at good practice and solutions to barriers. So first up, let's do that connecting piece with each other, sharing who we are. So please put your name and organisation in the Zoom chat and let us know where you are today. I'll see if I can find the chat. Too many screens up. Oh, sunny, Jason. It's kind of ish sunny here in Fife. North Ayrshire, Redshire Highland, I know you're up in Inverness. Oh, Rafi in London, brilliant. Angus, Lanarkshire, Perthshire. Oh, Sutherland. Berwickshire, Edinburgh. So I'm Siobhan, as I said, and I'm in Fife and I'm with SCVO. I should have prepared that so I could just copy and paste it. So there we go. That's great. It's brilliant to see so many people from all over the country. Brilliant geographical spread there. So that was one of the reasons we were keen to include an online series as part of Connect 23 to give some geographical equity across the country and also to give accessibility to people like me who find it difficult to physically attend events in person. So it's great to see so many of you here from across the country. This first event is a discussion about two very important and potentially overlapping issues, the climate crisis and digital inclusion. So we've got about an hour today and I'll kick off by giving a very short presentation to set the scene. If you were with us at our Connect 23 events in Edinburgh, Inverness or Glasgow, then you'll have already seen this presentation, but we have some people in the room who are new to Connect 23. After the presentation, I'll hand over to my colleague Jason and our guest, Ian MacDonald of Community Links in South Lanarkshire. Give us a wave, Ian. So we're really excited to have Ian here today. Thank you for joining us, Ian. Community Links is very experienced in both device refurbishment and in delivering digital inclusion programmes. We do want to hear from all of you today too, so please add your questions into the chat as we go and we'll collate them and we'll have a Q&A session after Jason and Ian have finished their section. If you have any useful resources you'd like to share, please add links to them into the chat box too. And also please do feel free to tweet during the session. The hashtag for these events is hashtag Connect23. I will just pop that in the chat so you've got that as well. So there we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and start this presentation if I can find the share button. There we go. Have you got my presentation on the screen? Brilliant, thank you. So as I said, today's discussion is about two very important issues, the climate crisis and digital inclusion. The wider context of this is that SCVO has been thinking about what we can usefully do to support the sector to take a sustainable and responsible approach to digital inclusion. We're not the experts and we're looking to learn too, so we've been engaging with lots of organisations working in this field and sharing as we go. So today we're going to be thinking about device reuse and how we can encourage and support this in our communities. But first, let's have a look at what does the internet actually mean for us and our impact on the planet. Our lives are now inextricably linked with the internet. Our communication, our commerce, our culture now depend on the internet in ways that we couldn't have imagined 10 or 15 years ago. This is what 1 minute looks like on the internet. We send 231 million emails per minute. We search almost 6 million times on Google. Other search engines are available. We swipe left or right over 1 million times on Tinder. Well, I don't, and I'm told that other dating apps are available. We share 65,000 images on Instagram, and we connect with 100,000 people on Teams per minute. But all of this online activity comes with a cost. The global carbon footprint of digital is now bigger than the aviation industry. So that includes all that digital activity we just looked at and running the infrastructure that supports it. But we also need to consider the manufacturing processes for new tech and how the materials are obtained. Lots of rare earth metals are mined with huge environmental impact, and obviously the shipping to get tech to us. The other obvious environmental impact is end of use, and less than 20% of e-waste currently gets recycled. Most e-waste is exported to developing countries, creating toxic landfill sites which are out of sight and out of mind. Last year, in 2022, 500 million new computer devices were sold globally. And currently, there's an estimated 300 million devices sitting unused in homes and office cupboards across the UK alone. Despite all this, not everyone in Scotland has access to a workable device to enable them to get online. It's troubling, but it doesn't mean that now is the time to abandon digital. We already know that we depend on it too much for that. But industries evolve and solutions are found. A good analogy here is the car industry. The pollution damage previously done has gradually been getting addressed. It's been an iterative process. We still have a long way to go with it and a long way to go with digital. That's a given. But by making the right positive steps, we can reduce our impact. So what does this mean for digital inclusion? We all want the same thing in this room. We want people to have access to the internet in a way that works for them. That includes having a device, the right device for their needs and for their skill level. But we need to manage this necessity, balancing it with the impact on our beautiful planet. So how can we do that? The first step is by asking people who have already been doing a great job of finding that balance. So I'll hand over now to Jason to have an engaging conversation with Ian MacDonald of Community Links in South Lanarkshire, who's been working on finding this balance for years. Jason.
Thanks, Siobhan. An engaging conversation. I like to think all of my conversations are engaging. I can see from the smiles across the room that you all agree as well. I've been sitting there sniggering away, but yeah. Anyway, Ian, hi, how are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Not at all, not at all. We're so pleased you could come along today and have a chat about your work, which, so as Siobhan mentioned earlier, we've been having conversations with organisations across Scotland about device refurbishment and reuse and that link with digital inclusion. And Ian's project, Community Links in South Lanarkshire, is one of the projects that we spoke to and really thought, actually want to share this a bit wider. So first things first, Ian, maybe you could give us just a kind of brief overview of who you are and what it is your organisation does.
Sure. So, well, as per Jason's kind introduction, I'm Ian Mack. I'm the IT officer at Community Links South Lanarkshire. Community Links is an anchor organisation. We exist to support communities towards meaningful engagement, participation, long-lasting change. And now that I've given you the bullshit bingo version of who we are and what we do, I'll give you the plain one. So we were started in 2002 by 6 local volunteers and activists. And at the time of regeneration, the whole point was that people actually had a say in the investment in their own area. You know, it's like people are thinking, if I get one more bloody play park that we don't need, you know, so that was the point. What are the local priorities? What do local people actually want during social regeneration? And that's how we started. And digital, as far as digital engagement is concerned, we've been providing free reconditioned IT devices to referred individuals, usually through schools, NHS, partner employability agencies, etc., for nearly 18 years. And I think we've got approximately 1,500 devices out there right now. We also provide a complementary project, and that's called Select, Now that stands for something, so I'm going to try my best here. That stands for Supporting Employment and Learning by Empowering Communities in Technology. Now, we love an acronym, right? So we're really, really lucky that that one stuck. So what Select does is it provides free one-to-one IT support on a drop-in basis. Service users can ask for anything, like from searching for jobs to applying for a blue badge online, that type of thing. That's delivered by trained digital champions and is supported by local volunteers. Yeah, I think generally, before we get into it, that's kind of the point here, is I think for any digital refurb program to be successful, it's about investing resource into the aftercare. So as well as the likelihood of kind of maintenance and troubleshooting of what are older devices, you need to offer the end users some kind of further training opportunities should they require it. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good kind of overarching point there. And I think it kind of feeds into my next question, which is really, I'm interested in what it is that drives you to do what you do. So why is it that sustainable digital inclusion is such a priority for Community Links?
Well, as kind of mentioned before, we're a community consultation organisation, so it's not our priority, it's the people, it's the communities we serve. So it's through consultation, speaking to them regularly, that's always been up there on the list. The only thing I suppose that's changed in my tenure there is whatever the hook is. You know, it's like back then when we first started, it was Tools for Schools. The whole point was free PCs to like children who were underserved, and that was to get them on a level platform with their peers, basically. You know, that's maybe in 2013 or so. Digital, the digital hook was formed by, it was welfare reform. You know, so there's a bigger push for getting people with this universal credit moved into online only journals, for example, and people were maybe coming out of jobs for like 30 years, they're onto a market they just didn't understand anymore, you know, how to search for jobs and how to service that account. So that's maybe changed. But I say, on top of that, though, I have to be quite honest, it's not completely altruistic. Our survival depends on community consultation engagement. So the more empowered our communities are, then the bigger the scalability, the reach and the diversity of any of our consultation endeavours. So there is that. It's a little bit of a selfish thing, but generally we believe that technology and its offerings should now be, or at least it's considered a basic human right. So therefore that opportunity to participate in the digital world, it should be available to everyone regardless of the economic standing. And so that was kind of, I suppose, our first go at this type of thing. It was about tackling poverty. I suppose an innovative way originally to tackle, you know, what's known as the poverty premium. Anybody here will understand what I mean by that. Is actually cost you money not to have tech, not to have the internet. And I suppose that was our first stab at it, was to actually prove that having a device and internet wasn't some costly luxury that would be the first to go when times were hard. It's one of the things that actually will make your economic standing a bit better, a bit easier. So I think I always used it. I always say this when people ask me about why we did it, and I always use one example. Asda opened a really large superstore. Now, other large superstores are available, Siobhan. I think that's the theme for today. But they were building in one of our local towns, and they were heralding the whole local jobs for local people, which is fantastic. But at the time they were doing that, that town had a 45% uptake on broadband connectivity against it. I think at the time the UK average was just under 80, you know. So that town had no wherewithal, no skills to actually complete an online application that Asda was using.
Right. I think that's really interesting. I think that's a good example of those kind of economic barriers and blockers. And I suppose I'm quite interested as well in terms of the process that you use. So I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about where your devices come from and kind of what happens in between getting them and giving them back out.
Right. So it can be different every time. It always depends. We're lucky enough that as part of our service level agreement with South Lanarkshire Council, we're charged with managing local networks of like third sector, smaller groups and organisations. So we actually are quite good at being known, getting our face out there. So that helps in two ways. It means that we've got, I should also say, we're also part of the digital subcommittee that's run by South Lanarkshire Council. So whenever there are things available, whenever anyone's doing like a capital equipment upgrade, it's kind of known that we'll be the ones that will take it. So we've kind of placed ourselves there as the go-to. Suppose that's the best way for us to do that for actually receiving devices, doing the ask. We do generally do it's almost like fundraising. I always liken it to fundraising, but we always do an ask as well, like kind of a bit wider. But most of our donations, like for example, we get a real large donation. I think I'll talk about this later on anyways. I think there were 70 odd devices from South Lanarkshire Council. And I think that when we first spoke before, we did talk about this because that came with its own surprises. Like at the time, South Lanarkshire Council were giving away these 70 devices, but they said that's on the provision that you deal with data erasure and provides reports to say every machine has been erased to whatever military standard we determine. Normally, things like that, the council's IT team would undertake that task themselves, but citing their own lack of resource at the time, I think a lot of people were working from home or whatever was happening, they said, no, you need to do this. So it's not something, it's like, these are little surprises. It's not something we'd actually anticipated nor had really planned for. So we now had to learn what's the actual procedures for data erasure. So basically, we would get a machine in, we would wipe the data, again, get it set back up, and now there's a stage. Again, if anybody wants more detail on this kind of thing, I'm available to everybody here because there are ways to do data erasing, there's ways not to do it. What I do first is I do a soft reformat of the machine, and the reason for that is because then my digital license for each operating system will be held on the cloud. Whereas if I'd just completely done the big erasure first, and that operating system's gone, and you've basically lost that, or you have to pay for a new one in order to validate that machine. So with data erasure, we put on free versions of like open source software, like your, what's the word, the Apache's OpenOffice, for example, in place of Microsoft. Good thing about that is it looks exactly the same as Microsoft. So anyone has any Microsoft knowledge at all will be able to use that with, yeah, it's hard to tell. It's very, very similar. Put on free antivirus, things like that. And if there's any specific other programs that the end users wants, we'll put that on too. Delivery as well is we've got a team, there's like 3 people just now, a mixture of staff and volunteers, all of whom are digital champions that complete the deliveries, and they're available, generally speaking, for a year of maintenance support. That's a figure that I suppose we say for safety because all of our contracts last a year, but the truth is I'm still servicing machines that I've given out 5 years ago, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a really important point there around data and data erasure, and that's something that we know is a significant challenge and barrier for both sides of the equation, both for donors and end users in terms of refurbished machines. But I wonder if you could talk us through some of the key challenges in this work, data and anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the data one's a big one. As you say, it's in 2 sides. I don't know if this is true, but I spoke to one of our partners who does similar work in North Lanarkshire. They're called LAMH, LAMH. It's the Lanarkshire Association Mental Health, and they've got a factory up there. We're doing this. They told me stories of some companies that are actually just burning, getting rid of the machines completely, rather than trusting a third party to undergo data erasure. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the type of thing you're dealing with. But I would say generally, securing devices is probably one of the hardest things. I mean, we've been quite lucky, as I said, mentioned that as part of our activities, we've put ourselves in place as the go-to locally. But the other, I suppose the main one, we're not actually currently funded for our refurb activities. So we were previously through your good selves, the Digital Refurbishment Fund, the SCVO, and then previously through Voluntary Action Fund and South Lanarkshire, Scottish Government, sorry. So we do these activities, and we're in a fortunate position. We do this as a nice to do, kind of add on to our funded priorities, if you like. And as anyone, I suppose, in this sector will tell you, lack of resources is always an issue. one of the things as well that to watch out for with regards to data erasure, I think that as well we're talking about it was, and again, this is just completely inexperienced in being green. When you do the erasure certificates that are produced, now they're you can't tamper with these PDFs from the created, which is great, that's what they want. But they refer to the serial numbers of the hard drives in each machine. So you probably find that even an organisation as big as South Lanarkshire Council didn't actually have an inventory where they married the hard drive to the machine. So in their inventory, they're saying, right, you have this Dell laptop serial number, blah, 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 blah. And actually I'm performing erasure on a hard drive serial number, whatever. So we had to undergo a really, a marrying, an inventory audit again with South Lanarkshire Council before we could actually proceed. And I suppose, you know, the biggest actual problem in this field right now as well is connectivity. Is that machines are actually, they're a lot easier to come by than the internet. So yeah, you can deliver a laptop to a family, but it might as well be a coaster if there's no internet connection. You know, we spoke about that before. And there are some options out there. I think like Vodafone were really good in the last couple of years. They had a program where they would deliver SIM cards with, it was, I think at the time it was 30 gig per month connectivity, free for a year. And they did kindly extend that too. But one of that brought its own problems. It's like then you had to find some kind of device, whether it was a phone or a little kind of mini router in order to house that SIM card, because they wouldn't provide those as well. So yeah, it's the whole field's a kind of cat and mouse where some problem comes up, you know, there's a knock-on effect here and you have to attenuate all of those. And I suppose there's probably another 100 ones that I haven't came across yet, but I soon will.
That's a really good point there, what you were saying around the issue of connectivity and how that relates to people's needs. And I think we are all in this room of the opinion that digital inclusion is everybody's responsibility. Everybody has a role to play in how that changes. But I'm wondering, do you think that the private and public sectors are doing enough? What else can they be doing? And maybe just on that issue of connectivity, be focusing slightly more on the private sector.
Right. Okay. I mean, yeah, that's a big question. when we were actually in the digital subcommittee and we're speaking to, it was specific looking at rural areas, right? And we're speaking to some of the big providers and they're saying, yeah, we're doing a massive rollout, you know, fiber's going to be in these places, but not one. And we're all, yeah, great success. We're all kind of patting each other on the back about that and the great work we've done, like speaking to the providers, but not once was it spoken about the poverty issue, about how is this affordable? You're talking about coverage, but not affordability. So there does need to be, I believe that it's getting better here. So there are some people are offering certain deals for low income families. It's getting better, but it's definitely, it needs to spend a bit more time on it. But I think generally speaking, the private sector should probably be doing more to implement sustainable business practices that prioritize refurbishment and reuse. I mean, I think even incentives or competitive trade-ins, for example, is a good way to encourage donation. I mean, there's a lot of laptops sitting in cupboards right now, as we've spoke about before. And after which companies can either resell at affordable prices and offering warranties and even quality assurance, you know, kind of like the used car business, you know, there's no reason that can't be a thing, but they offer it and do offer that warranty, or they could donate to organisations like ourselves to their own social corporate responsibility programmes. I think as far as the public sector is concerned, they should be incentivising that too. They should make it easy for the private companies to actually do this. But I mean, it all comes to one thing, and we all know this. It's more funding for third sector organisations that public sector have to do. I mean, I used the Connecting Scotland programme, right? You guys were involved with. That was a phenomenal endeavour, absolutely superb, and it was the timing of it was really, really important. So what I'm saying here isn't to denigrate that, right? But there was no resource for the third sector organisation who joined in as delivery partners to actually absorb things like maintenance or support or delivery. So it relied on the, I suppose, the altruism of the sector to actually just get that work done. And we were lucky, as you say, it's our responsibility. So we're in a position to absorb that and take in those costs. But it precluded the joining in or the taking part of a lot of other organisations for whom there was no resource or funding, you know? Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
I think it's a really valuable point in terms of a culture change that needs to happen on both sides, both in terms of the voluntary sector becoming a lot more businesslike and demanding the resources that it needs to do what it needs to do, and also a culture change within the private and public sectors to recognize and understand the value of the voluntary sector, not just as a nice partner to chuck corporate social responsibility at, but actually to trust and support and, you know, provide infrastructure to.
But the individuals have the responsibility as well. And this is the thing, as we've spoken about before, what was the figure that you gave me again for number of laptops?
30 million.
30 million laptops. I mean, just sitting and covering. So we need to get past the psychology of that, right? Are people holding on to that? I mean, that could be anything from, you know, that cost me a lot of money, I will use it one day, to I really don't want anybody seeing my browsing history. You know what I mean? Or like, I might have a Bitcoin wallet in one of those, I'll check later. I don't know the psychology, but I think we're winning the battle with climate awareness, I think, for the most part, except for a kind of minority that believe it's a hoax created by Bill Gates and NASA. We're winning that battle, I think, but we need to make it easy for individuals to give back. So I think making it easy could look like a lot of different things, but even things like having drop-off locations that are specific to e-waste, you know, school and community programs offering like donation, and again, even incentives for recycling, like cashback when you're buying new, for example, after which we could do what we spoke about. You could then reintroduce that the old material back into corporate responsibility or resale, whatever. I mean, or I think just generally, it's like, I'll go back to what we said before for actually talking about the ask and how it's like acting like a fundraiser. I think it's a good thing here. It's like the supporter journeys and storytelling is really important to create the positive donor experience generally. Now, whether that's a larger organisation or an individual, it's like we like to take a look at what information we can provide after the fact. So for a larger organisation, that could be something that's like, yeah, here's your information to say we've done all the data erasure. But it can also be something as simple as a regular thank you letter with success stories, leaving out personal information, obviously, but it's not difficult for us to, but it's not going to be a breach of GDPR to say, like, for example, yeah, that's, you know, the person that got your laptop secured a university place thanks to having that, you know, or secured a job recently they found online thanks to your laptop. And in that fundraising, I suppose that kind of mentality, you can then, the smaller interactions, you can work out who your warm and cold donors are. And it could be it could be the difference between one donation and 10. You know, yep. Your warmer donators or donors may be in that position to give again in future. And again, you'll be the go-to, you'll be at the front of their mind when they are ready.
I think that's a really good point. And I think you're absolutely right. There's lots that we can learn and transfer into this, just like every other part of the sector. I think that's a valuable thing to take away. Never thought of that before. But kind of on that point, I'm wondering, in terms of going back to you and your organization, the people you work with, what kind of demand have you got at the minute? Do you think you're ever going to be able to properly satisfy that with the service that you've got?
Oh, no, do you know, there's a whole sea change. It's going to be more than us. You know, I mean, I think the integration of our lives and technology generally is only going to increase. So there needs to be more innovation, and not just in terms of new equipment, that's happening anyway, but in prioritising the refurbishment of everything there to reduce that environmental impact and electronic waste. But as far as we're concerned, I think In the last financial year, we delivered 57 devices last year, and that's without funding and very little resource. I think the previous year, when we were funded by your lovely selves, I think that figure was close to, you might know that, but it's 130, 140, I think, whereas we put out something along those lines. And we're quite proud of the reach we've got in South Lanarkshire, but to fully attenuate that digital divide is, there's a big attitude change is needed generally across all sectors.
Absolutely. And I think that extra resourcing comes with an attitude change as well from the people that are feeding in. Absolutely, I think that's spot on. And in terms of thinking maybe about the quality of devices you receive, how often is it that you say, "No, we can't take that"?
That happens. Yeah, again, there's other places where we've been quite fortunate because, as I said, because we manage a group of networks during pandemic times, a lot of those small organisations didn't survive. So we were kind of tasked at tidying up all the resources or the capital and things like that. So we actually managed to receive quite a few machines from organisations that just unfortunately just didn't make it. But I think the best thing to do is to be honest in your ask. So any market materials or whatever we put out, whether it's a public ask or a begging letter to an organisation, we kind of state that we base it in the operating system. So the oldest operating system we'll accept is Windows 7. And that way we can pretty much be sure that it's going to meet that criteria to upgrade to Windows 10. And we know that for at least a couple of years, it's going to receive those security updates and support. I think where we have, and it has happened, we will accept machines of the lesser quality, but we will make it known that it'll be recycled responsibly, but it probably won't get reused. And I always tell them it's like a chef, respect the animal, use as much of that as you can. So strip it of things that may be useful, like RAM chips, hard drives, whatever. So, and then again, the bones or the bricks go to one of our recycling centres locally, one of our partners like LAMH, for example.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great way to look at it. You're full of these great metaphors today, and they're brilliant.
You should have a counter for them. I like to speak in alliterations as well. People might have noticed. I was going to do a ding for everyone, but I thought that might be overkill.
I love it. I've been writing them all down. I'm going to steal them all. But yeah, I suppose kind of moving towards the end of this part of the conversation before we'll hand over to people to get involved. It's a room full of people who are obviously very passionate about digital inclusion, but also this element of digital inclusion, which is about being ethical and being responsible and sustainable. So what is your take-home message today? What is it that you want to say to them?
I'm taking donations. No, just first, thanks for having me. As I said, I do appreciate the chance to talk to you all today. And Siobhan and Jason have my contact details. If anybody does want to, if you think of questions after the fact or whatever, are there anything you would like to ask or any kind of pitfalls, or as I say, I'm here, just ask me or drop me a line. I've been doing this for 18 years now, so I'm aware of some of the little annoyances. So I suppose generally just says, get back to say, if we prioritise that reuse of IT equipment, we adopt those circular economy principles generally, the third sector, we can make that. We can contribute. We're not going to do it all, but we contribute to that sustainable, equitable future. But we've got a real opportunity here. It's a digital engagement, as we said before. It's not really been it's not been sexy in funding terms for a wee while. It's not been in vogue, but we can reshape the argument here and put it into that digital inclusion, but also the environmental and climate context. This is our opportunity now. And prove there that, as the title says, digital inclusion, circular economy, natural allies.
Perfect. That's Ian. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience. I think we've got about probably 15-20 minutes just to hand over to the baying crowd here, who I'm sure will have some thoughts and questions. But I think Siobhan's been looking at the chat.
Absolutely, that was great, Ian, loving all your analogies in there, especially the nose to tail of device refurb. I was like foodie myself, I'm loving that. So yeah, there's been lots of great chat in the Zoom. Lots of people picked up on that connectivity issue and especially mentioned the National Data Bank. Kirsty from Redshare Highland is pairing the Vodafone SIMs with refurbished MiFi devices. So Kirsty, do you want to talk a little bit more about the refurb MiFis you're getting and what other refurbishment devices you're using in your program?
Yes, we've found that over the last year especially, we've focused more on refurbished devices for our device allocation programs. Primarily, we put out a lot of devices and connectivity, and we also give the support for the recipient to use that device, because as everyone knows, unless you show them how to use it, it's just a very expensive doorstop. So we found an organisation called Input Community Works. I don't know if you guys know, I think they're based in Ayr, and they're a social enterprise, and they work to give people with learning difficulties employability skills. And one part thing that they do is they do some refurbishment of tech, and we get 3G MiFi boxes from them for £7 each, which is fantastic. At the moment, we're pairing them with the Vodafone National Data Bank SIM card, which will give 6 months. However, Vodafone are turning off their 3G this year. I'm kind of almost blindly hoping they'll make an exception for the Highlands, because, you know, we do have significant connectivity issues up here. But they're actually trialling a new 4G MiFi that should be available to us for about £25 once they've got that sorted. We're actually going to trial one for them to see how it works up here in the Highlands. So in that respect, we can pair a Chromebook or a laptop or a tablet with a MiFi box and 6 months of data. So the Vodafone National Data Bank SIM, they get 40 gigs per month. And that gives them 6 months without having to worry about connectivity. And obviously after that 6 months over, we help them to either get a social tariff or we're allowed to give 2 cards to one person. So for some people, they can get a whole year of connectivity. So we also pair the MiFi boxes and the SIM cards along with refurbished Chromebooks. So we're working with a company called ILM Highland, who's based in Alness. They receive all the Chromebooks that come out of the secondary schools in the region from the Highland Council. And then they refurbish them to a really, really high standard. They're beautifully clean. They're PAT tested. Their operating systems are on. They're secure. They're absolutely lovely. And then we purchase them at a kind of refurbishment cost price. At the moment, it's £50 per Chromebook, and then we can put them out to people who desperately need them. And in that way, you know, the Connecting Scotland programme was fantastic, but an iPad was a significant cost and an expensive device to put out, whereas we can probably put 7 Chromebooks out for the cost of 1 iPad. So in our head, it made sense to use the refurbished devices to reach more people and reach further into the Highland region. We do struggle with phones, I have to say. We really struggle to find enough phones to meet the demand. There you go. And sorry, I was pointing out something. We find that we're a donation point for recycling devices as well. We work with ILM and we work with a charity called Reboot in Forres, who do recycling. But for every 10 phones that we get donated, we maybe can use 1. And that's down to issues of it being too old, too out of date, broken, cracked screen, it's locked to a network, locked to an ID. So we've actually found that putting out a kind of half dodgy refurbished phone, which may only give a recipient 2 or 3 months before maybe a security patch won't work, we prefer to buy a cheap, basic new smartphone to give recipients peace of mind that at least they know they've got a year's warranty for the say. So I would love to find, and I'm always on the lookout, a really good source of refurbished smartphones. So if anybody has any tips for me, please do give them. So we are kind of fully committed to continuing to incorporate refurbished devices and the circular economy in terms of digital inclusion here at Redshare Highland. And it's something we're quite excited about because it is extending our reach and helping us to reach far more people than we ordinarily would have.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks, Kirsty. I don't know if I can actually hear me. It looks like my phone's a bit frozen. Yeah, fab. Sorry, I've lost my questions screen while I tried to fix my sound there. So that's really useful, Kirsty, and that really reflects a question that Irene from Moore was asking about devices and when they're out of time, too old. Can you give us a bit of chat about that, Ian? What are you doing when you find that devices are kind of past their time? Are you asking for devices that are in a particular age range when you're getting donations? How are you addressing that?
Well, we don't ask for a specific range. We just ask, we say, bring us your tech, and we get PCs, monitors, hard drives, games, headphones. We get all kinds of tech, and we put everything into Reboot. They will recycle anything that isn't usable or refurbishable. So they go through and pick out, as Ian said, all the kind of valuable bits and make sure that it fully complies with the electrical waste recycling regulations. We've been trying to encourage organisations in the Highlands to donate, but they're very, very trepidatious and suspicious of it. So Reboot can provide certification to such organisations to say, yeah, your gear has either been refurbished or recycled to these standards. So that can help people, organisations donate more. But yeah, out of time devices, we had a laptop that had Windows Millennium on it. And it was like a briefcase with a carry handle and everything. It was, the day it came in, we were like, wow, this should go to a museum. It was literally 23 years old. I would say at the moment of the devices that we're getting in, it's probably less than 25% that we can actually successfully refurbish and can be reused by recipients. So it's not reliable yet. We can't rely on refurbished devices completely. And with phones, we've kind of moved away from even trying, because there's so few and we're never terribly certain about how long this person's going to have it. And if we're giving a phone to someone in a time of crisis, they need to be able to rely on it. So we tend to buy a Motorola E20 as 80 quid at Argos, or we go to Curry's and get a good deal in a bulk buy. And that at least gives us some comeback with the manufacturer's warranty. And we know that it's going to plug and play and work. We don't want somebody who's living a chaotic lifestyle in the time of crisis to all of a sudden not have that lifeline. So with phones, it's a slightly different issue. But we find that refurbished Chromebooks are a really good first device for a lot of people who perhaps don't have the digital literacy competence or skills to get on the internet. It's quite intuitive. They don't have to worry about virus protection. We're really pleased with the programme of Chromebooks that we're putting out, and we're hoping to continue as long as we can, as long as we find funding. In the third sector, we're always reliant on finding funding to carry on funding this important work.
Thanks, Kirsty. That is really helpful. And that's something that I'm kind of reflecting on as we do this work. There's so much opportunity for this work to almost kind of self-sustain in terms of its funding. There's little opportunities where we're seeing organisations almost monetize parts of this process, so that data issue that a lot of donor organisations have a problem with, some of the refurb organisations are actually then charging for that data clearing that and providing that certification. So there's new opportunities of bringing these assets into the third sector and creating money within the third sector from this process. Are you finding that same sort of thing yourself in your work? Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, it's my first day. Yeah, basically, I just kind of echo what Kirsty said there. It's everything there was really interesting. A great point.
Cool. And I see Irene's had her hand up, so I know that Ian answered kind of the majority of your points in his chat there, but do you want to delve into anything else you'd like to ask now, Irene?
Mine was specifically considering, to a certain extent, the devices that are being discarded for or sent to refurbishment by these sort of organisations like the local authority. It's whether or not the folk receiving devices are then kind of doubly impacted almost, because have they got sort of time frame, or how long do you see them lasting when they're refurbed and then given out to folk for all that lovely wraparound care that you're doing, Ian?
Yep. Yeah,
Like how long do they then have? Because my concern from digital inclusion perspective would be that then they might have a negative experience that's out of their control. It's because the devices have already like gone through one cycle, and so now we're putting devices back in to folk that really need them as a lifeline. You know, your ASDA example was brilliant. So it's totally different from folk in secure employment in the council already, and then they're getting a device that's been refurbed, which is brilliant. But is that it? Like, what's the lifespan for that person? What's their experience? Is it positive usually? Like, are there what do you see when they're going out in the field again, back into the wild?
lifespan can be an absolute lottery. That's
Yeah.
the truth of it. It can be.
Yeah.
Generally, what we like to do is we keep a bank, basically. So if someone brings back something, as they say, they, for a year or so they can get maintenance. If someone brings something back, it's just that's going. Then we have a bank which just replace and say, there you go, this one's working. And again, it might not work for it might work for another year, might work for 2. What I would say is let's try to see the positive in some of this as well, because generally speaking, they're working, right? But what better barometer of someone's skills increasing than them saying, that's not moving quick enough for me? Do you know what I mean? That's a fantastic barometer of them developing their own skills. I used to say, I play music, and the way to understand if you're getting better at piano is when you're better than the instrument, you know. So that's kind of how we see it. And hopefully what we'd like to do is get people to the point where they are in a better financial position, or they then after a year they'll see it as an investment and they might be able to buy something brand new themselves. Or as long as I can see that they're actually, that improvement is there and they're still using it, I'll keep replacing forever. I will.
I totally agree with everything you're saying. Clearly, like that's it. It's just some of the folk that we're supporting, like through Simon Community and that, they would just automatically assume that it was them. They wouldn't be at the stage yet where they went, this device is too slow for me. If it wasn't working or whatever, they would take on absolutely, this is another example of me being rubbish at everything, because their levels of self-esteem, self-confidence, everything is so low and so shot through by all of the systemic shit that's been heaped on them over the years, that they get that. And that's my biggest fear, is going, I don't want to contribute to folks' bad experience of life by going, this is just how, because it is also all of us that have access to digital stuff all the time know that this happens, and you go, that's not me, that's well, 50% of the time it's clearly me, but you know what I mean.
Oh no, it's a brilliant point. We're as I say, we've got that complementary kind of drop-in project and thing. But again, there's other issues to it as well. I do realise that for a lot of people, that first engagement is the hardest thing on earth, you know. So I do get that point. But I suppose for like yourself, if you've got that contact already and you're a trusted person, it's about the aftercare. Make that part of your general engagement with them, is to say, how's the computer? Are you using it? Does it work? You know, sometimes it can be slow.
See, that sentence there actually is where my head's not quite there. I'm so worried about it, but by introducing it as part of your holistic care, I guess, going, you know, sometimes these go wrong and it's not you. That's hugely empowering, like you say.
Yeah, but it's not a specific, you're not making a big deal of it. It's just a comment, you know.
Yeah,
so I don't know the answer. You'll know better in that field, like the sensitivities there, but it might just,
folk are totally more empowered. Like, they genuinely will go, that's great. If you set the tone that it's not just you, that's it, then they get it. But I think it's a bit that's maybe missing from practice. So that's really helpful, Ian, actually.
Good.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in there that we've been finding. There's the aspect of almost triaging the devices as they come in. So it's identifying the quality of the devices. And then there's also the device for the person and their skills level. So it's that conversation when people are referred to make sure you are getting the right device to them.
That was something we didn't actually cover, Siobhan. It's a fantastic point. It's like making the device appropriate for the person, because when we set out to do, I think it was, you'll maybe remember, but during the Digital VPAR Fund through SCVO, we'd originally set out to say, it was like, no, I'm only having laptops because the people that these are going to go to, they're not going to be able to afford an ergonomic and a safe desk to house like a desktop PC. We're going to do laptops and we're going to do tablets, you know. For some people, the older people, for example, and I don't want to generalize, but some of them, older people, would only consume. So it's about either speaking to grandkids, or it's about doing your shopping or whatever online. And other people would thought maybe a bit more creative. You know, it's like some people specifically asked for, I think it was GIMP at the time, like in place of Photoshop, to get put on, so they could do a bit of creative design, drawing, that type of thing. So we would look at the spec of what's available and see if there was like extra RAM, we could actually juice up some of the machines. So as much information as possible from your referring organizations, right? So I think we spoke about this before as well. We never had a criteria for receiving a device. We always trusted the organization to say, no, I work with this person and I know they would get a great benefit. That's enough. So if you've already got that relationship with the referring organizations, get as much information about how they're going to use it at the start, and then, you know, you can make sure that whatever device they have is appropriate to them. So sorry, I jumped in on you there, Siobhan, but
No, that was a great point, Ian. I completely agree. It's all about that person-centered aspect of digital inclusion, and it's about asking people what they're going to use their device from and delving into where digital would be useful in their lives, rather than asking them what device they want. And a lot of people jump to, especially the iPads, if that's what their family use. And we've already covered that there's a lot of problems with recycling and refurbishing iPads. So it's a brilliant point, Ian. It's all about that person-centered nature that works really well with digital inclusion. I just wanted to bring Rafaela in very briefly. Rafaela has talked about working with the private sector to bring large business customers to donate into the National Device Bank. And I'm really interested, Rafaela, in Ian's point that there's a struggle when things don't come with an inventory, and how time consuming that can be. Is that something that you've been able to crack in the National Device Bank, and how's that going?
I think we're still quite early on, to be honest. So I work in the B2B division of Virgin Media O2. So we have a lot of quite big public sector customers, you know, large local authorities, police institutions, hospitals, things like that. So what we're currently looking at is how we can embed reusing devices as part of our kind of, you know, contracts when we get these new customers on board, about what happens to the devices once they're not using them. So obviously we have a strategic partnership with Good Things Foundation at Virgin Media O2 through the data bank, but now we're also looking at the device bank. So yeah, just trying to, I guess, embed that process in everything that we do. And I know from their perspective that, like you said, that kind of, you know, there are a certain number of devices that get donated that can't always be used, and that percentage doesn't really change, but the number of devices that are more, you know, likely to be used with larger donations are obviously increased. So it takes away less, I guess, of the admin if you're receiving lots of smaller donations. So yeah, I think it's something that's still in progress, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to once we have more of those large customers part of that device kind of process, what the potential could be, because I know they've seen really great things through the device bank so far at Good Things. So I guess just as that grows and they're constantly on the lookout for new devices, I think it'll be really interesting to see what impact that has. But one thing that Good Things have said is that, you know, the National Device Bank is something that's probably needed, but also all of these, you know, hyper-local interventions that are happening with small charities, small organisations who are refurbishing devices are still going to be really vital on that really local level, especially for kind of, you know, really rapid responses that people might need. The device bank isn't at all looking to replace all of those hugely important organisations that are doing amazing things at a really hyper-local level.
Thanks, Rafaela. Oh, sorry, I've muted myself there. Thanks, Rafaela. That's really useful. So that is a really great point for us to end up on. So again, we would just encourage you, as Rafaela mentioned there, to connect with your local device refurb organisation and see if you can work together in this area. And if you are a device refurb, continue to get your name out there and share what you do. I'm just going to share a link to a list of device refurb organisations that we're aware of across Scotland. So go ahead and link with those and let us know if you find any more. And remember, this event was part of our Connect 23 series, which is all about connecting. So please do keep in touch with each other and keep sharing that great practice. If there's an organisation you want to follow up with but don't have contact details for, then get in touch with us and we can connect you together. And thank you so much, Ian, for contributing. It was such a great chat, really useful to have your expertise.
Thank you again. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant, thank you. Anything else you would like to add, Jason?
No, we'll send out just a re-evaluation form in an email for everyone. But that's it. Thank you all so much for coming along, and I'm sure we'll speak to you all soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.